Hey boys and girls, coming to you from my back porch for some Read Aloud today. It's so beautiful and I hope that you've been embracing this warm weather as much as we have. Last we learned that Kensuke was in the Japanese Navy, I guess you could say, or military. He was a doctor on one of the warships, and when the ship was bombed, everybody died except for him. And the ship kept sailing. Eventually it hit land, which is the island that they're on right now. And we learned that as Kensuke stayed there, he didn't have a desire to go home because he found out that Nagasaki was bombed, which is where his family was at. I believe that some U.S. military had come to the island and he had hid from them, but he listened to them talk about how the atomic bomb had wiped out everything, and he thought, why would I want to go home if my family's going to be gone? And so right as we left off, I had asked you to think about the story elements. Think about the parts of this story that help us remember all of the key details, especially since we're taking such breaks in between reading this, unlike at school where we would be reading every day. It's good to be thinking about where the story began, where it hit its climax, and where it's going right now. The very last part we read, Michael, or Mike Hassan, as Kensuke began to call him, was rowing the boat, and we learned that Kensuke had a lot of trust in him because he just let him do it and fell asleep in the back. And I last asked you to also think about whether or not knowing each other's history will impact how the story ends. That's the last sticky note I'm looking at here. And will it change how Kensuke or Michael feel? He had saved my life twice, fed me and befriended me. He was right. We were happy and I was his family. But I had another family too. I thought of the last time I had been out on a boat, of my mother and my father and how they must be grieving for me every day, every night. But now they must surely believe that I was drowned, that there was no chance I could be alive. But I wasn't drowned. I was alive. Somehow I had to let them know it. As I struggled to bring the outrigger back to the island that afternoon, I was filled with a sudden powerful longing to see them again, to be with them. I could steal the boat, I thought. I could row away. I could light a fire again. But I knew even as I thought it that I could not do it. How could I ever leave Kensuke now, after all that he had done for me? How could I betray his trust? I tried to put the whole idea out of my mind, and I really believe I would have too. But the very next morning, I found the plastic Coke bottle washed up on the beach, and after that, the idea of escape came back and haunted me day and night, and would not leave me be. For some days, I kept the Coke bottle buried under the sand while I wrestled with my conscience, or rather justified what I wanted to do. It wouldn't really be a betrayal, not as such, I told myself. Even if the bottle was found, no one would know where to come. They'd just know I was alive. I made up my mind. I would do it, and do it as soon as I could. Kensuke had gone octopus fishing. I had stayed behind to finish a shell painting, or so I had told him. I found an old sheet at the bottom of one of his chests and tore away a small corner of it. Then I knelt down at the table, stretched it out, and painted my message on it in octopus ink. To the Peggy Sue, Fareham, England. Dear Mom and Dad, I am alive. I am well. I live on an island. I do not know where. Come find me. Love, Michael. I waited until it was dry, then I rolled it up, dug my Coke bottle out of the sand, slipped in my message, and screwed the bottle up tight. I made quite sure Kensuke was still intent on his fishing and set off. I ran the entire length of the island, keeping always to the forest so that there was no chance Kensuke could see where I was going or what I was up to. The gibbons howled their accusations at me all the way, the entire forest cackling and screeching its condemnation. That airplane? I just hoped Stella would not bark back at them, would not betray where I was. Fortunately, she didn't. At last, I reached the rocks under Watch Hill. I leaped from rock to rock until I was standing right at the very end of the island, the waves washing over my feet. I looked around me. Stella was the only witness. I hurled the bottle as far out to sea as I possibly could. Then I stood and watched as it bobbed away and out to sea. It was on its way. I didn't touch my fish soup that night. Kensuke thought I was ill. I could hardly talk to him. I couldn't look him in the eye. I lay all night in deep torment, racked by my guilt, yet at the same time still hoping against hope that my bottle would be picked up. Kensuke and I were at our painting the next afternoon when Stella came padding into the cave. She had the Coke bottle in her mouth. She dropped it and looked up at me, panting and pleased with herself. Kensuke laughed and reached down to pick it up. I thought he was about to hand it to me when he noticed there was something inside. By the way he looked at me, I was quite sure he knew at once what it was. At this point now I'm thinking about how that would make Kensuke feel once he figures out that Michael was still trying to reach his family, if that would hurt his feelings or if he'd be understanding. The night of the turtles. There fell between us a long and aching silence. Kensuke never once reproached me for what I had done. He was not angry or sullen at me. But I knew I had hurt him to the soul. It wasn't that we didn't speak. We did. But we no longer talked to each other as we had before. We lived each of us in our separate cocoons, quite civil, always polite, but not together anymore. He had closed in on himself and wrapped himself in his thoughts. The warmth had gone from his eyes. The laughter in the cave house was silenced. He never said so. He did not need to. But I knew that now he would prefer to paint alone, to fish alone, to be alone. So day after day, I wandered the island with Stella, hoping when I returned that he might have forgiven me, that we could be friends again. But always he kept that distance between us. I grieved for my lost friendship. I remember I went often now to the other end of the island, to watch Hill, and sat there, no longer looking for ships, but rehearsing aloud my explanation. But no matter how much I rehearsed it, how I reasoned it, I could never convince myself that what I had done was anything other than treachery. In the end, as it turned out, it was Kensuke who explained it to me. We had just gone to bed one night when Tomodachi came to the mouth of the cave and squatted there. She had done this once or twice lately, stayed for just a few minutes, peered in at us, and gone off again. Kensuke spoke up in the darkness. "She lose Kikanbo again," he said. "She always lose her baby. Kikanbo very wicked baby. He run off a lot. He make Tomodachi very sad mother." He clapped his hands at her, shooing her away. "Kikanbo not here, Tomodachi. Not here." But Tomodachi stayed, I think for comfort more than anything else. I had noticed before with the other orangutans how they would often come to Kensuke when they were upset or frightened, just to be near him. After a while, Tomodachi slunk off into the night and left us alone again, with the din of the forest and the silence between us. "I think many thoughts," Kensuke said suddenly out of the silence. "You are sleeping, my cousin?" He had not called me by name for weeks, ever since the Coke bottle incident. "No," I said. "Very good. I got lot to say. You listen. I talk. I think many thoughts. When I think of Tomodachi, I think of your mother. Your mother, she too lose her baby. She lose you. That very sad thing for her. Maybe she come looking and she not find you. You not there when she come. She think you dead forever, but she see you in her mind. Now as I speak, maybe she see you in her mind. You always there. I know. I have son too. I have my Kaya. He always in my head. Like Kimi. They dead for sure. But they in my head. They in my head forever." For a long while he did not say another word. I thought he had gone to sleep. Then he spoke again. "I tell you everything I think, my cousin. It best way. I stay on this island because I want to stay on this island. I do not go home to Japan. Different thing for you. You want to go home across the sea. And that right thing, good thing for you. But not good for me. For me, very sad thing. Many years I live alone here. I happy here. Then you come. I hate you when you first come. But after a little while, you are like son to me. I think, maybe I like father to you, you like son to me. I very sad now when you go. I like talk with you. I like listen. I like sound when you speak. I want you stay here on this island. You understand?" "I think so." I said. But you do one very bad thing. We friends, but you not tell me what you feel. You not say what you do. That not honorable thing to do. When I find bottle, when I read words, a very sad person indeed. But after a little while I understand. I think maybe you want to stay here with me, and you want also go home. So when you find bottle, you write message. You do not say what you do because you know it make me sad. I write, yes? Yes, I said. You very young person, my cousin. You paint good pictures, very good pictures, like hokusai. I wonder what hokusai is. You have long life waiting for you. You cannot live whole life on an island with old man who die one day. So, thinking like this, I changed my mind. You know what we do tomorrow? He didn't wait for me to answer. We start build new fire, big fire. We ready then for when we see ship. Then you go home. And also we do another thing. We play soccer. You, me. What you say? All right. It was all I could say. He had, in just those few moments, lifted the whole weight of guilt off my shoulders and given me such happiness, such new hope. Very good. Very good. You sleep now. We do a lot of work tomorrow. A lot of soccer also. The next morning we began building a beacon on the hilltop above the cave house. We used most of the pile of firewood we had collected for the cooking fire and stored in the dry area at the back of the cave. He even sacrificed some of his best pieces of driftwood. It wasn't far to carry it, so before long we had enough to make a sizable fire. Kensuke said it would do for the moment, that we could find more from the forest, more and more each day, as we wanted. We soon have fires so big, they see in Japan, maybe, he laughed. We have lunch now, then sleep, then soccer, yes? Later that afternoon, we set up sticks in the sand for a goal and took turns shooting at each other. The ball was very soft, so it didn't bounce any better in the sand than it had back in the mud of the playground and back home. But it didn't matter. Kensuke may have carried a stick. He may have been as old as the hills, but he could kick a soccer ball well enough to put it past me, and often, too. What a time we had. Neither of us wanted it to end. With a crowd of bemused orangutans looking on, with Stella interfering and chasing after every goal, we were at it till darkness drove us at last back up the hill. We were both too tired to do more than have a long drink of water, eat a banana or two, and go to our sleeping mats. It was after our reconciliation that I came to know Kensuke better than I ever had before. His English became much more and more fluent, and he clearly loved to speak it now. For some reason, he was always more happy to talk while we were out fishing in his outrigger. We did not go out that often, only when the fishing was so poor in the shallows that we needed to catch big fish for smoking and keeping. Once at sea, the story simply flowed. He talked a great deal of his childhood in Japan, of his twin sister, and how the worst thing he'd ever done was to push her out of a tree in their backyard, how she'd broken her arm, how when he painted that cherry tree, it always reminded him of her. But she, too, had been in Nagasaki when the bomb fell. So now we're learning why he always paints that same tree. I remember he even told me the address of where he lived when he was studying in London. Number 22, Clan Ricarde Gardens. I've never forgotten it. Once he had gone to watch Chelsea playing soccer, and afterward he'd sat on a lion in Trafalgar Square and been chased away by a policeman. I'd be eager for some of you to look up Clan Ricarde Gardens and Trafalgar Square in Google Maps and see what you can find. But it was Kimi and Micaiah he talked of most, about how he wished he could have seen Micaiah grow up. Micaiah, he said, would have been nearly 50 by now if the bomb hadn't fallen on Nagasaki, and Kimi would be the exact same age as he was, 75. I rarely interrupted him when he was like this, but once to comfort him I did say, bombs don't kill everyone, they could still be alive. You never know. You could find out. You could go home. He looked at me then as if it was the first time such a possibility had ever occurred to him in all those years. Why not? I went on. When we see a ship and we light the fire and they come and fetch me, you could come too. You could go back to Japan. You don't have to stay here. He thought about it for some time, but then shook his head. No, he said. They are dead. That bomb was a very big bomb, very terrible bomb. Americans say Nagasaki is destroyed. Every house. I hear them. My family dead for sure. I stay here. I safe here. I stay on my island. Day after day, we piled more and more wood on the beacon. It was massive now, bigger even than the one I had built on Watch Hill. Every morning now, before we went down to the pool to wash, Kensuke would send me up to the top of the hill with his binoculars. I always scanned the horizon, both in hope and in trepidation. Ooh, trepidation. I longed to see a ship. Of course I did. I longed to go home. But at the same time, I dreaded what that would mean. I felt so much at home with Kensuke. The thought of leaving him filled me with a terrible sadness. I determined to do all I could to persuade him to come with me, if and when a ship came. At every opportunity now, I talked to him of the outside world, and the more I talked, the more he seemed to be interested. Of course, I never spoke of the wars and famines and disasters. I painted the best picture of the world outside that I could. There was so much he didn't know. He marveled at all that I told him, at the microwave in our kitchen, at computers and what they could do, at the Concorde flying faster than the speed of sound, at men going to the moon, and at satellites. These things took some explaining, I can tell you. Some of it he didn't even believe, not at first. The time came when he began to quiz me. In particular, he would ask about Japan. But I knew very little about Japan. Only that back home in England, lots of things, including our microwave, had "Made in Japan" written on them. Cars, calculators, my father's stereo, my mother's hairdryer. "I made in Japan person," he laughed. "Very old machine, still good, still very strong." I'm going to stop reading there, and I want you to try to write a persuasive piece convincing Kensuke to leave the island if or when a ship comes by with Michael. I want you thinking about all of the pros and cons, trying to understand from Kensuke's perspective why he doesn't want to leave, and also thinking about it from Michael's perspective, what he can do to convince him to leave, and where you think Kensuke might live if he were to leave the island. We'll do some more read aloud tomorrow, boys and girls. We're almost done with the book.